Hi, my name is Sylvester Humai. I set up this channel. This is going to be my first video. I'm going to go by Slovakian Patriot. I was born in Slovakia, but I'd like to talk to you today about the gun control issue. Every time we have a horrible mass shooting, we hear from the mainstream media about how we need to talk about gun control. Okay, fantastic. Let's talk about it. So, it's been a few weeks now. Unlike, the knee-jerk reactions from the media where the bodies are still warm and yet they're screaming about banning ARs or whatever. I'd like to have a common sense approach to what the solution should be here. And the solution is never going to be more gun control, and it's never going to be let's surrender more of our freedoms to the government, because if only they had one more law, if only we passed one more legislation, if only there was one more gun control, if there was only one more policy where the government could take away people's rights, somehow the shooting would be prevented. This is a perfect example of how that is never going to happen. So real quick, I'm going to ramble this through real quick. 39 times the police came to this kid's house in the past 7 years. There's other numbers we've bounced around, 45 times in 10 years, whatever. It doesn't matter. Let's err on the low side and give the benefit of the doubt. About 36 times, at least 36 times, the local police, the Broward County Police Department, could have stepped in and stopped this kid from either owning a firearm. It's very easy to actually prevent this kid from having bought a firearm legally, right? Because he did legally buy this AR-15. The easy way to do that would have been one of the times that he demonstrated clear violence, throwing his mother up against the wall. When she called and they showed up at his house, it wasn't the first time, it wasn't the 5th time, it wasn't the 10th time. This had been happening for years. They should have arrested this kid, charged him, and he would have had domestic abuse on his record and not been able to purchase a firearm. I was at the gun store years ago, and there was a kid who strolled in and said, "Oh, I don't understand why I didn't pass the background check, what's going on?" And the gun store owner, it's Chester Arms and Dairy, and the gentleman who owns the store said, "Well, you must have lied on your application, on your gun background check paperwork." And so the FBI caught the fact that this kid had at one point got into some sort of a fight, some sort of an altercation with his girlfriend, and his point was, "Well, it's not domestic violence. I didn't hit her or anything." Didn't matter. Prevented him from buying a firearm years later. And it was at the point where he was feeling angry but also kind of embarrassed, and he was explaining himself and saying, "Oh, it's such a minor thing. It's not like I lied on the paperwork. Doesn't matter. Now the police are going to show up at your house, and now there's going to be an issue because you've tried to purchase a firearm and you didn't admit on the paperwork that you did have a history of domestic violence." And again, that could be expunged years later, I think, and there's different ways to go about that. If you have enough money, you can possibly get your gun rights back and own a firearm down the line. But for, a decade or whatever, this kid would not have been able to purchase a firearm. So they failed. The police failed. They could have done that dozens of times. All of those different things, the posts on social media. If you torture small animals and you're not just torturing an animal once just to get some kind of a kick as a little kid, if you're doing it repeatedly, and if you're proud of torturing animals, and you're so proud of it, in fact, that you post it on social media, there's a problem with you. That's serial killer, mentality. That's you have serious mental health issues, and of course we knew he did, and of course the FBI was tipped off twice. Now the FBI shouldn't have been tipped off even once, to be honest with you, because last time I checked, a part of the reason for surrendering our rights, and we willfully every day go along with the system where the NSA can tap into your phone, everybody can hear anything you say when you have a cell phone around. There's all those, some of it's conspiracy, but we all know it's true. If you post something psychotic on social media, that's what it's there for, right? The NSA should catch that and go, "Whoa, this person might be a terrorist," or whatever. They failed to do that, and then when they failed to do that, 2 separate occasions somebody tipped them off and called the FBI and said, "There's a huge problem here. This kid's going to be a mass shooter. This kid's going to shoot up a school." His aunt called and said he's going to get an insurance policy now that his mom died. and he's going to use that money to buy guns and possibly shoot up a school. There was dozens of cases of people saying, this kid is mentally unstable. This kid is the definition of a school shooter. And the Broward County Sheriff's Department, Sheriff Israel, ignored that. And it's not just the fact that the deputies cowered behind their cars and they didn't go inside. As horrible as that is, by the way, and whether that's their fault or they were told to stand down, whatever, it's complete 100% failure. As terrible as that is, as terrible as the FBI dropped the ball multiple times, and as terrible as it is that nobody got this kid to a mental institution and didn't take him off the street, or at least get him, or at least arrest him and prevent him from owning a firearm because he wouldn't have passed the background check to buy the AR-15 that he had. As horrible as all of that is, Sheriff Israel said that he demonstrated amazing leadership when he was being grilled by the media. Really let that sink in. You expect the government to help you? You want the government to step in and save your life when something like this happens? Yeah, I mean, if there was an armed teacher in the school, you arm 5 out of 30 teachers in a school, you have a hallway of 12 or 16 classrooms, right? As soon as shots are fired, whoever has, the concealed carry permit, the 2, 3 teachers or whatever they have it, run outside and they start engaging with the shooter. Well, even if at that point they are not able to take him out, they're buying precious time for kids to run away or for the police to get there or whatever. There's something being done versus nothing. Why is it that gun control at all costs is all we hear? That's the only mainstream media narrative. Why is not arming teachers the right thing to do? Israel does it. It works pretty damn well. As we all know, the only way to stop a psycho is to shoot him and stop him from pulling the trigger. But here's the greatest thing that I want to talk about, the greatest failure, that I want to talk about. He called the cops on himself. So if you think the government is just terrible at doing their job, and if you think the FBI failed, and if you think the police department failed, you're absolutely right. But what a lot of people are not talking about, you might not even have heard in the mainstream media. I know a lot of people, for instance, I've spoken to in the past few days about this, had no idea. He called the police and said, I am despondent, I am going through a rough time, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in my life, I need help. And he mentioned the fact that his mother passed away, of course, and they still did nothing. They should have come and taken the guns away and gotten him to a mental hospital. It didn't happen. Stop expecting the government to save you. Stop pushing more gun control. It was more than enough gun control to keep a gun out of this kid's hands if the police had just done their jobs, if the FBI had done their job. Just once. We're not talking about a failure rate of, if they were even successful 2.5% of the time, 1 out of 40 times if they were able to do their job. 2.5%, not 96%, not 99%, 2.5% out of those 40-something cases where they should have stepped in. 2.5% success rate would have gotten this kid off the street, or at least kept the firearm out of his hands. But you think another gun control law is going to magically change next time around? It'll be fine because is there going to be this one other gun law? No. Banning bump stocks is dumb. I think bump stocks are dumb. I don't even know an AR-15, but it's absolutely criminal to think that somehow that's the narrative that needs to be pushed right now by the mainstream media, that they think they're helping, which, I mean, we all know some of them don't. They just care about ratings. If it bleeds, it leads, right? I do also agree with stop talking about the kid and stop mentioning his name. I think we should make it that the school shooters become anonymous. I don't need to know his name. I don't care. It's not going to save anybody's life to say what his name is. Stop making these kids into anti-villains. That's what they want. We can go all the way back to Columbine. There's a mental health problem going on, psychotropic drugs, all that stuff. Yes, absolutely, I agree with all that stuff. Stop saying the shooter's name. That would help. Report on it, but don't glorify him by showing 15 different photos of what he looked like in his yearbook, and here's what. No, stop. So that's it. That's gonna. This was supposed to be a video. My first video on this channel. I wanted to be sort of introducing myself and explaining where I'm coming from, and the whole purpose of this channel is I want to talk about my personal experiences with socialism. I was born in Slovakia in 1979, and my family legally, of course, came to America in 1987. My dad actually came in 83, and then my mom and I got out finally in 87. that's a whole story in its own. That's going to be 2 or 3 videos just explaining all that whole process and the sort of unique and crazy element of that. But that's what this channel is supposed to be for. I sort of, years ago, 12 years ago, as far back as 12 years ago, people told me that I need to tell my story and I need to get out there and share my story with people and warn people of the dangers of socialism and sort of tell my life experience and what I've seen, because I've seen, growing up behind the Iron Curtain and then now being in America, and I live in the live free or die state here in New Hampshire. So it's a very interesting sort of life path, and I think I have something to contribute, and so I would like to make some small videos and share my story with the world. But this turns out I decided this was going to be the first video because this needs to be said. Government is not going to save you, and not only are they not going to save you, just like Sheriff Israel, when they fail and 17 people end up dead because they failed 36 times, they will pat themselves on the back and say they showed amazing leadership.